I'm talking about intimate relationships and the pressures that our intimate relationships are under and how that relates to our loss of community. And given that this talk is about intimate relationships, one of the things we're going to start off talking about is what actually is an intimate relationship. Then we'll go on to look at the crisis that our intimate relationships are under, and then how we can better support ourselves. And if we get time, we shall go on to love and being in love and the differences. And hopefully at the end, we'll have some time for some questions and answers. So if you've got any specific questions about a relationship situation, hopefully we can do that. On the weekend workshops, one of the pieces of work that you're required to do or asked to do before you come is to consider the relationship in your life that gave you the most pleasure and the one that also gave you the most suffering. It might be the same one, but I asked you to look at those for each for 20 minutes, no longer, and then bring that to the workshop, because that becomes something that hopefully you'll go away with, having got some answers and some comfort. Okay. So, on to intimate relationships then. Sadly, for many of us, when we talk about intimate relationships, the first thing that pops into our mind is the sex, which of course is an extremely important part of the intimate relationship. But we shouldn't forget that the emotional side and the spiritual side, if it's a truly intimate relationship, play very important parts as well. So for me, to get the definition up front, the intimate relationship there is there to bring together those three components in a harmony. So the physical, the spiritual, and the emotional. Now, I have my own beliefs, which come from a mix of different cultures, but I'd like to share with you now that for me, what gives me satisfaction and meaning in my life is that the energy that I believe we were all given, the spiritual energy when we were born, the purpose of our life is when we expire physically, this body in this world, is to hand back that precious piece of spiritual energy to our great Creator in a purer form than it was when it was given to us. Okay. And to achieve that, we as human beings are very special in that we have the power to actually make that purification process happen. Okay. I talk a lot about the 4%, and the 4% refers to a lot of things, but two big things for me are, the first one is the knowns, the unknowns, and the complete unknowns. And I think it was Socrates who said that in terms of what we know, there is what we know, and then there's what we know we don't know. And then we have the biggest of all, which is what we don't know we don't know. So latest research into the universe shows that of what we know and what we know we don't know, we only know 4%. So we are aware of 96% of what's called dark energy or dark matter that's out there, and we know it's there, but we've got no way of communicating with it or defining it. And in the same way with our DNA, we understand 4% of it, but the other 96% scientists will say, oh, it's rubbish, it's obsolete, we don't need it anymore, but that just doesn't sound true for me. So if we are 4% of what we know, what we know we don't know, and something out there is incredibly bigger, it either makes us incredibly insignificant or, for me, very special. Okay. And to achieve that specialness, which is to be able to hand back that piece of energy, that spiritual energy, Our being with nature and our being with our community and being with our partner in an intimate relationship, they are the foundations, they are the groundwork in which we can actually develop our spiritual energy. Okay, so when we're in an intimate relationship, is very special. This plant, this beautiful plant here, can only grow because it's being held by the earth that nourishes it. And in the same way with human beings, we only develop when we're held. So held in the womb, held at mother's breast, held by our parents and held by our tribes and communities. That's how we nourish as being. And I'm not a conspirationalist, if that's the right word, as much as some people like David Icke, but I really do feel that in terms of us being controlled by the system or the Illuminati, then the principle of divide and conquer, it remains. So as far as actually people want to control us as a society, the more that we can be divided, the more our communities can be broken, the more easily we can be controlled. And you might share some of that, and you might not. But certainly the intimate relationship, what makes it so special is that it makes us look at us. Okay, so I describe what I call the bird shadow. So every bird has a shadow, but not until that bird actually gets close onto something do we see the shadow. And so it's the same with our intimate relationships. We all are very good at being bright and breezy and friendly and you know, in what I call the honeymoon stage of an intimate relationship. But it's actually when we start getting together and the distance comes between us that those bits actually come out. Yeah. So the bird shadow, and we'll come on to the shadow side of us in a little bit of time. If we don't believe there is a crisis, I've got some statistics to share which I can summarise. I'm not a big fan of statistics, but there are some statistics out there which give some compelling evidence that many of us probably know already, that intimate relationships are struggling. And the statistics that I've got actually relate to marriage, which of course is a very small proportion of intimate relationships. But unfortunately, we only have records for marriages and divorces. Now, the upside is that a marriage, except in the case of a forced marriage, there is something more to go on than just the physical. Okay, so if you're going to marry somebody, hopefully you're marrying them not just because of the physical stuff that you think you can do together, but you're marrying them because you can see an emotional and a spiritual bond that can be developed there. So marriages are quite meaningful like that. Going back to what I said earlier on, I've got kids who are in their early 20s, and I talk about intimate relationships with them, and they say, "Oh, it's too deep, Dad, too deep." You know, I had an intimate relationship last weekend, and I'm going to have one this weekend. You know? And so, God, I mean, can you imagine? I mean, so I guess marriage is at the tip of the iceberg. But it seems that in Western world cultures, so this is not just the US and the UK and Europe, but in Eastern cultures that are becoming more westernized, there seems to be consistent data which says that 50% of all first marriages will fail in the first 5 years, and 67% of second marriages will fail in the first 2 years. And for those who are brave or foolish enough to go back for a third time, it's even worse. It'll probably happen in a year. Um, so what's going wrong? And it seems that divorce, statistically, is by far and away the biggest cause of our stress and suffering. So beyond, bereavements, beyond illnesses, beyond moving house or losing job, loss of our intimate partner is the biggest cause of suffering. And the biggest reason cited for divorce, anybody got any guesses? The biggest reason that comes up that's cited for a divorce?
Communication.
That's certainly part of it, yeah. Adultery.
Irreconcilable differences.
It is.
Loss of sex life.
Yeah, well that's pretty irreconcilable. It is actually irreconcilable differences. Yeah. So now, so quitting a relationship because of irreconcilable differences can be a very healthy thing. On the other hand, in many parts of the world where people are actually in marriages they don't want to be in, the growing ability for women to be able to vote with their feet on differences by leaving a marriage is a much welcome thing. But it's where there are what I call the unfortunates, who are the ones who are unempowered to make the choice, who can't make, are really unempowered and can't make those decisions for themselves, which is not what I'm looking at today. I'm very much looking at those of us that are fortunate enough to be able to actually choose with whom it is we get involved. So for those of us that can choose the basis of our intimate relationships and our partners, given that the differences is the biggest torpedo, surely it's worth looking at how these differences arise and how they could have been dealt with. And if they could have been identified up front, i.e. at the onset of the relationship, then a lot of suffering could have been avoided all round. Of course, there are going to be differences that will come up. As I said, until the shadow actually brings you close enough, and out comes this issue. But there's so much that could actually come out at the front of an intimate relationship entry, which we might be scared of, but could have saved a lot of suffering in the long run. There will always be differences, and that's normal, it's exciting and it's healthy. And it's actually working with differences and challenges that develops us in a partnership or in a relationship. It's the not sharing of the important stuff, including our feelings, which causes the problems. And these are what I call the great undeclareds. And they fall into three main groups. And one is the undeclared attributes that we have. So our values, our behaviour, cultural things. And then we have the undeclared expectations of what we think we want from a relationship, but we don't actually tell our partner. And an example of this is the woman who's met the guy on the internet. They're into the third date, she's really in love, this is going somewhere, it looks fantastic. And I'm not going to scare him off now by telling him that I'm 37, the clock's ticking, and kids are very high on my agenda. He's similarly besotted with her, but he says he's going to wait a little while before he tells her that he's actually impotent. He's going to wait until they've had a relationship for 6 months, and then he'll spring it on her over dinner or, down the pub one night. But then she'll be, they'll be bonded and it won't be an issue. But of course what happens is, after 6 months, it comes out and the bomb goes off. So that's an extreme example. And then the other one is the undeclared baggage that we bring. I'm trying to find a more pleasant word for baggage, so, but there is the baggage, and a lot of it is unresolved issues from our childhood that we're now looking in this adult relationship with this partner to try and get resolved or play out. And this is the stuff that we need therapy on, stuff that we need to work on. So it's all, if it's all out there at the beginning, as much as we know, then the less chance of it all going to pop down the road. And I mean, can anybody here say they've been completely honest about things that they think could have derailed a relationship that they didn't bring out at the start? It's a bit like saying, "Ye who was without sin cast the first stone," isn't it?
It's hard though, isn't it? Because you go to the second date and you go, right, I've got this, then that's just going to frighten the wits out of somebody.
Yeah, it's got to be actually, it's got to be done with diplomacy, and at the same time, I mean, we don't want to put ourselves out there, under the spotlight until we think this is actually worth me saying, "Here I am. This is me." Yeah. And so I'm sure I've done it, but it always leads to trouble down the road. And one of the biggest things that we don't, that many of us are guilty of in relationship, is at the beginning stages is acting. So, as you may be aware, if we sometimes behave to please our partner or our intended, and the more we want to please them, the more we act. And of course that's not healthy, because you don't end up then with a relationship, you end up with a stage with two people on it. And one of the things, the key elements of a healthy relationship, including the healthy relationship with ourselves, is to be authentic. So regardless of my ambitions to improve myself as a person, regardless of my ambition to become more spiritual, to become more something or more whatever, until I'm actually comfortable being me as I am, and until my partner accepts me for me as I am, then we're on a sticky wicket. Because if they're not accepting you for being your authentic self, then who are they accepting? What are they acting? So, get it out there. At least, I mean, that's probably the most important, is to be the authentic. Can anybody say that at the start of a relationship or into the stage of a developing relationship that they've been able to actually be authentic?
Yes, but then it ended.
And it ended. Oh, but it is such a relief when you take down the facade, because the energy that it takes to try and pretend something, to try and cover something. Has anybody?
Sometimes if you actually have a friendship, if you have a friendship, a long-standing friendship, and then you develop a relationship, that's so much easier because you
Absolutely.
you've known.
Yeah, that's a great way of coming at it from a friendship point of view. Yeah.
But don't you think the whole problem is just about authenticity anyway?
It is.
A lot of people, their identity is being based on the ego of what's, what is acceptable to other people, what parts people like, what parts don't they like, and then they think that's their authentic self, when actually it isn't their authentic self. So if we don't know what our authentic self is, that's where the problems with the relationship.
It is.
And we only find that authentic self with being in a relationship.
Yep.
And finding the parts of ourselves in the shadow that are being mirrored to us, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So being us, and being honest and being clear, and the amount of energy that we burn pretending to be something we're not. If anybody here has had an extra marital relationship, you'll know the incredible amount of energy that gets burned in playing a charade that can be put to so much better use. And the moment of the release, when you say, as John Parkin would, fuck it, I'm me. And if you don't like me, well, try and get to like me. But if not, then, get your needs met somewhere else. But that is so important. If we're not in a healthy relationship with ourselves, the chances of being in a healthy relationship with someone else are vastly diminished. And the starting point of being in a healthy relationship with ourselves is to sit down quietly on the mat and look inside and see what's going on with us and where we are. So, coming on to the things that we bring to a relationship, the two biggest challenges that come up in an intimate relationship are...
Who's going to put the bins out?
Jealousy.
Well, yeah, it's certainly a component of it, but put you out being inconsiderate. It's actually fears of engulfment and fears of abandonment. So this is stuff that we bring to a relationship. And I can remember as a child being potty trained and being held on a potty until I delivered something. And I had no clue why. I was powerless to do anything about it. But it went in hundreds, if not thousands of times. And I wanted to get away, but you can't. So for me, that gave me issues of engulfment and disempowerment. And the same with of abandonment. When mum leaves for the first time and she's gone, is she coming back? When's she coming back? And as toddlers, from the point when we recognise how important it is to have mum there, and then she goes, and we're powerless. She's gone. And so in a healthy family environment, we get the right balance of being held and left, and we get the reassurances. But unfortunately, for many of us, our parents didn't have the skills to be able to do that job. And these are things that a lot of adults we have to work on now. Coming back to differences, irreconcilable differences, guess what the two irreconcilable differences are, the biggest ones, the ones that are given as the biggest two. They're pretty much neck and neck, irreconcilable differences. Come on, think about the biggest irreconcilable differences you've had with your partners.
Child rearing?
Child rearing.
Child rearing.
Yeah.
Child rearing.
That's not one of the two, but it's a big one.
Dishonesty of the child.
Having to live up to other people's expectations.
Money. Sex.
Sex?
Cooking?
No.
Money.
The two that run neck and neck, irreconcilables, are money and not being loved. There was no love. So,
well, how does money come into it, Zanny?
okay, well, when we come on to talk about our communities, which are great cradles for relationships, in fact, I'll give this now. In our communities, life was so much easier in our tribal communities that we've lived for tens of thousands of years. We grew up as kids with loads of parents, with lots of support. We are recognised at a young age as to what our skills are. We are encouraged to develop our skills to do a job in our community. And in that community, our job, whatever it is, whether it's gathering herbs, whether it's hunting, whether it's making skins, building accommodation or bringing water, is all equally valued. And the community, your role in the community is valued, and the community will tell you if you're not pulling your weight. Yeah. So, in a community, what you put on the table is there and judged by the elders as to be sufficient, or you should do more. Yeah. But in a successful community, the elders would actually say, this is your job, this is the basis on which the community nurtures you and feeds you, and you're part of it. But everybody has a job. Unlike some of the animal kingdoms, like a wolf pack, where immediately you're no good at hunting, then that's it, you're cast out. You can't, when you can't pull your weight, that's it. Birds, for example, I guess are particularly vicious in that a male and a female bird will have their territory, but the minute they can't defend that territory, they go away and die. And that's how it is. And some birds will may have 3 eggs and 3 chicks, but will decide which one is going to be the strongest, and they boot the others out the nest, which is quite a tough community. But in our communities, we had elders to look after us, and they would talk about fairness and giving and appreciation of our job in the community. But now we've got a community of 2, along with all the other stuff that we have to try and make our way through. We have to, between the 2 of us, decide on the value, who's putting equal value on the plate for the community of 2. Yeah, which puts an enormous burden on each other and pressure on each other. From you use the car 3 times a week, I only use it once a week, so I'm buying 1 tyre and you can buy the other 3. Ah yes, but when you drive long distances and you drive faster than I do, and but that's so money, which is in the community of 2, is where you don't feel your partner is either valuing what you're putting on the table, or you don't value what he or she puts on the table. Where there's that imbalance, that's where it creates a problem. Because in our communities, the elders it wouldn't be down to you to say about who was contributing what value and how it was recognised. And of course, in our intimate relationships with our partner, we all do things at different times. So, we can be a parent when we need to be. We can be a beautiful homemaker when we need to be. There'll be times when one of us is more able to go out and earn money than the other. But it has to feel balanced. And it's when we don't feel balanced and we feel unvalued, and it's when we don't talk about it, that we start to have problems. Has anybody here had a problem with a partner that they felt wasn't pulling their weight? And how did you address it?
Not very well. My ex-husband was an alcoholic, and he died of liver poisoning after I divorced him. He couldn't give it up, but he pretended early on in the relationship that he wasn't an alcoholic.
Hmm. Yeah. So it's one of the one of the great undeclareds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one where my father and my child had an undeclared wanting me to be like really good domestically. Now I've always been very not good domestically, not very tidy, for example. And that was, I thought, raving the obvious about me, but it turned out that his mother was like a super practical, super good housewife, organizer. And as time went on, he started to feel that I was just really not, I was letting him down in a really deep area, whereas to me it was a very superficial thing.
It's funny, isn't it, how things that can be trivial to us can be huge to other people.
Yes, absolutely.
And when we go into a relationship, it's so important to actually get this stuff out there. And if you're uncomfortable with putting it out there, then you should ask yourself, why am I uncomfortable saying this? You know, and that probably comes down to some insecurity in here, in being me. But why can't you put it out there? And so in a community of two, we've got all these practical stuff to sort out, like the expectations. Well, I've got a busy job during school times, and I really would appreciate it if you cook a meal for me 2 times a week, do the shopping, you know. Okay, you need to go out with your mates on Friday night down the pub and talk about the football, and I need to go and do my music class, you know, and that's all right. And then, you know, it's not, I wouldn't call it a prenuptial, but there has to be, you know, some openness of understandings of where we are, and what our expectations are. So I can, you know, if you enter a relationship, I can say, okay, I'm a recovering gambler, and it's stuff I need to work on, but this is where I am. I have problems with being held, and so if you come and squeeze me too much, I might be backing off, but I'm working on it. But I need you to know this. So putting stuff out there, if there's not enough with that going on, then we have the less than helpful physiological drivers. So I like to mention the T-shirt experiment, where a group of women were asked to sniff the rugby vests of 15 players. and under very scientific conditions, the woman was spot on identifying the male through the sweat whose gene pool was the most complementary to hers. Because she's looking for a male who is going to strengthen the genes of their offspring such that they will have more immunity to disease, will be stronger. So she has a predisposition to be attracted to a guy who is like that. And what is very interesting and amusing is that for a woman to be able to actually do that, she has to be hormonally uninterfered with, so she can't be on the pill. And of course what happens is a lot of times women on the pill decide that they want to have children, they come off the pill, and now they can smell the male for what they actually are, and she's no longer interested. She's off. And it's true, you know, but unfortunately that is quite a strong driver, you know, because women are engineered to have babies, and they want the strongest babies, and they want the males that are capable of supporting her and the offspring. You know, she's got the big investment in the products of the mating, whereas the male is still, unfortunately, predisposed to plough the fields and scatter the good seed. And although males will be attracted, there is a scent of a woman who is going to be complementary. It's nothing like as strong as the driver it is for women. And
What happens if the guy that she's kind of smelling isn't actually compatible with her? Is that a problem?
Yeah. Well, that's why. I mean, if you know, procreation after our own survival is the second biggest driver, and that is because the universe wants to make lots of us unique human beings, wants to make us special beings that have the power to take spiritual energy and purify it and hand it back. For all of those that bugger it up and don't get it right, or never even address it, it wants us to keep churning them out. And of course, when it came to territory, males want boys as warriors, and the more people you've got, you know, the more you can procreate, the more you can protect your tribe, and the more you can go out and conquer other lands. So men are, you know, are predisposed to going out and furrowing and ploughing the seeds, and they do that and they're off, you know. But as I say, but of course women have by far the stronger investment in the intimate relationship.
A bit scuppered if they've got good deodorant, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
They know what you're smelling.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And this is, you know, where, you know, in terms of us being comfortable with us, how we get media brainwashed with all sorts of things we're supposed to be, including, oh, God, put some armpits on, put some deodorant on, you can't go around smelling like that, you know. So with these physiological drivers, it helps to be aware of them, because especially if we're not equipped with a toolkit to actually health check ourselves before we put a deeper foot in a relationship, especially for women, the physiological drivers, you know, can very big drivers, and can override good sense. So a healthy relationship is the fertile ground for us developing our spiritual energy. So as much as sitting down together in front of the television for 2 hours in the evening, eating our food, can be comforting, it's not going anywhere. Where's it going to go? And until you actually realise that the nirvana is the spiritual development, then you be comfortable, but you're not actually going to reach the ultimate goal. But a comfortable relationship, though, is the starting point for a healthy relationship, because part of a comfortable relationship, as we said earlier, is us being accepted for how we are. You know, for somebody who sees us as we are, sees us without projection, sees us without expectation, but sees us for us. And when we are safe, then we have the ambition, hopefully, and the drive then to move more deeply into the spiritual side. And I want to move now on to one of the big exercises in the workshop, which is where we meditate or journey on one of 3 questions. And the first meditation or journey is on the basis of knowing what is a healthy relationship. Why do I choose to remain in an unhealthy relationship? And we could be on the mat quite some time with this one. But for example, a woman who is abused might often choose, out of fear of the unknown, to stay with an abusive partner rather than leave and go into the unknown. There might be a behaviour that we have from our partner which is not healthy, but is reminiscent of a behaviour a parent had with us. And so we find comfort in that knowingness, but it's not healthy. So why do we choose, if we are in an unhealthy relationship, why do we choose to be in it? Fear, yeah. Yeah. We've all heard, haven't we, the biggest obstacle to love is fear. Or if love is letting go of fear, what is it I'm afraid of? And then the second option is, I'm actually in a healthy relationship, but why don't I like it? What is it that's going on in here that doesn't see me as being in a loving and healthy relationship? Has anybody had that one?
It's lack of love, isn't it?
There might be loads of love coming, but what is it that's not firing us up?
Well, love might not be familiar to somebody if they grew up in an environment where love wasn't expressed. Being in a loving relationship would be very uncomfortable.
Yeah, not.
It hurts. It hurts a lot.
Yeah,
Sometimes you want to get away from the pain.
yeah, and then we have to get on to what actually is triggering that hurt. There's answers to all of that. And the third meditation or journey is, how can I make a healthy relationship even healthier? Which is a beautiful place to be in. So, who has been in an unhealthy relationship? Yeah. And did you get out?
Yes. Yeah, actually.
Yeah. Oh, and you know, was it quite a big thing to get out, or was it, this isn't working? Yeah. And when a lot of people, getting out for healthy reasons, I say it's when the teachings have expired. Okay. So every relationship offers us teachings. Yeah. And up there, it's very wise. So they offer you this partner, and the idea being that you will have teachings for each other. But if you don't, if you're not authentic, both of you, if you're not taking the teachings, recognizing them and assimilating them, then you get cheesed off with it because it's not fulfilling your needs. So what happens? You leave, and up there says, okay, well, you didn't get it there, so here's the next one. And this is where a lot of us repeat patterns in relationships, is because we don't learn the lessons. And so we don't get moved on to the next challenges.
Do you think that's to do with our brain, though, going back to what it knows?
Yeah, it is. It's comfort. It's comfort and fear again. Yeah.
So if you've got a good relationship to start with, you'll usually end up screwing it up by going back in your brain to what it reproduces as what it knows.
Yeah.
What it's comfortable with, so it will reproduce it.
Yeah, we're playing out something, and and this is somewhere where we could probably do with some therapy, or at least a lot of time on the mat and some inner reflection. And another big issue in a relationship, remember I said, is about sharing our feelings and emotions. So intimacy is about sharing emotions and feelings. But there seem to be so few people that actually can really open-heartedly share their feelings and, don't say anything. And where people don't share their feelings, they're not in an intimate relationship really, they're in a partnership. They're there for, a partnership is defined as a practical arrangement to the mutual advantage of two parties. It sounds like a business arrangement, doesn't it? But that's when people say, oh, it's my partner. Oh, I'm in a partnership. Okay, yeah, well, it's cheaper paying the bills, two of us than one of us, But what does it actually mean, to properly be in a partnership? But so many people just don't share feelings and emotions, and they're afraid to go there. Fear of going there. And then what happens is that they're afraid of the consequences of showing their feelings and emotions in a relationship, because the other one, they start to get snappy and yappy. So they all, it'll either build up to something and go bang, and that's it, they'll part. Or they continue to live in this state of emotional divorce, where they do share all the practicalities, but there's no proper love, and they just sit behind each has a wall that they sit behind, and every now and again lobs a hand grenade over, touches their button. Anyone ever had any of that?
So what do you define as proper love?
I'll come on to that in a minute. Yeah. But when we talk about pushing somebody's buttons, in the journey to becoming maturer as human beings, we should really welcome our buttons being pushed, because the big question is, well, why is that button there? Yeah. Has everybody here got a button? Do they know? Yeah. Yeah. And you know why it's there? You ever sat down and thought, well, why is that button there? So in this field of work, when somebody pushes your button, whoa, thanks. Because that's the way of doing the work, is to identifying why the button's there, and then resolving it, and then just letting go of the button. It goes. And doing the work, I call it the work, in an intimate relationship. Remember I said that the essence is the spiritual nourishment. Yeah, it's of course you must have the safety where no one's getting hurt, and the nurturing of a good, companionable, friendly, compatible relationship with clarity and honesty, with respect. And it's from that that we create this earth, that this beautiful thing can grow. And I call it like the mountaineers, where the partners in this beautiful relationship start from a base and they stick in a clamp, and one climbs up, takes the risks, does the hard work and pulls the other up. Then the other one, from that point of consolidated safety, they decide, right, I'm going up there. And they climb. And then they climb to a place where that energy, that spiritual energy, becomes absolutely beautiful. And it's the elders and the chiefs in our film communities knew the value of this beautiful spiritual energy, which is why the relationship in our tribes was as much owned by the community as it was by the individuals. The same as with the offspring, they have biological parents, but the whole community owns the children. And because the elders are there and to help you nurture in your intimate relationships your spiritual energy, because they know from the magic that can be woven by a spiritual relationship that they're building the spiritual power net of the tribe, of the community. And in the community, something else we miss is when the two of you can't agree on something, then it's unless you're very lucky and you've got some sort of community around you that you can go and talk to, share with, but we haven't got the elders to bang our heads together and make us see sense. And we haven't got the shaman who would have gone on a journey for healing and to get you guidance to bring you back on track. So it's an immense loss in our communities. I didn't mention earlier that in our form communities, and I'm not advocating arranged marriages by any way or means, but our elders would have been there to see, as we grew up from children into adolescence, who was going to give the teaching to who was going to be best placed. And coming on to definitions of love, to actually be in love with somebody is quite a special thing. And for me, my definition of being in love is when your heart and your soul and your spirit, which individually vibrate, all we have in this world and the universe is vibrations. That's it. Everything is made up of vibrations. Yeah, that's all we have. It's vibrations at different frequencies. But when heart, soul, and spirit each have their own vibration, then they vibrate together. And if anybody's got any musical knowledge, they create harmonics that produce what I call a song. And that song can only be heard by somebody else who is vibrating in the same pattern as you. And that pattern occurs when the universe, or a great creator, sees that there are two people who at this point in time are optimally placed to nurture each other. And that's where the in love comes in. That's the real meaning of in love. Yeah. Not to be confused with in lust. And love, for me, is the act of unconditionally and selflessly supporting another's journey through life. I don't know what definition. Anybody else got a definition? I looked at this, I worked on this for such a long time because I've got kids that I love and friends that I love, but what makes that different to the love I have for my intimate partner? And English is very, unfortunately in our culture, we've got one word love for lots of things, whereas in other cultures, like in Turkish and Greek and Arabic, they have different types of love for different situations. So for me, the act of selflessly and unconditionally supporting another's journey through life is something I sit with comfortably. And I would suggest to you that if you've actually properly loved with somebody, and then you can't say, I don't love them anymore, because once you give your love, it stays. Yeah. So if you say, oh, I don't love them anymore, then I would suggest that you actually never loved them properly in the first place. And when you're in love and all the spiritual, emotional and physical stuff comes together in this beautiful cauldron to produce the goal, which is the spiritual energy, that might expire. And a really good reason for a relationship expiring is because one wants to climb more and the other one decides, I'm really happy here, which is absolutely fine too. But it's when there's a disparity in who wants to climb and who wants to consolidate or doesn't want to go further, that's when a relationship ends, and that's a healthy relationship ending. It's when, we've got the teachings, we've assimilated them, and we've polished that bit of spiritual energy, and now the other wants to go on, but the other one doesn't. And that relationship then ends. And that's not to say that that person in time will want to resume climbing, and it might be that those two will come together again, but that will be a new relationship. But that particular relationship will have ended. And if you see the beauty in that, there's no suffering when the relationship ends. Yeah. That's, you celebrate what you got out of it, the beautiful things that came out of it. And one wants to go on, and that's absolutely fine. Where a lot of the suffering with the endings occurs is in the same way that when we want a relationship, we want it on our terms. When a relationship ends, we want to end it. Hey, you can't end it. I want to end it. Has anybody got miffed here that a relationship ended over which they didn't have control? And so nobody here has been in a relationship which ended over which they had no control. Nobody walked out on them. But isn't that funny? And this is the ego. The ego is a very complicated thing, but we have the ego that behaves itself, keeps us safe, and then we've got the ego that wants the special treatment, jump the queue, special privileges, I don't have to do that. And the ego that says, okay, I want the relationship, but I want it on my terms. But when you're properly in love, the two egos bow for the sake of the bond, and they give up the ego. I want to prove I'm right and you're wrong. They surrender that for the bond and the welfare of the relationship. So when the end comes along, there's not this ego saying, well, I want to get out of it. Anybody here married and divorced? Yeah. Anybody experienced when a divorce comes up and somebody says, okay, well, I'll agree to the divorce, but I've got to make sure that it says on the paper it was me that asked for it. So many relationships seem to be about scoring points. So I've shared with you two definitions of love and being in love, but I'd like to hear some others. Anybody got any offers on?
One of the definitions of love that I like is when you really want that person to be happy, and that's your primary concern, is that you want them to be happy. It's quite a rare thing, but I like that definition.
Yeah. I want for you what you want for you, within reason. Because if, you know,
But doesn't it have to be within reason? Because you've all got barriers and boundaries
absolutely,
that you
yeah,
don't want to step over.
yeah, yeah, and here we are. One of the skills of a counsellor is to give unconditional positive regard, or be non-judgmental. And in a relationship, we are all to a degree, greater or lesser degree, we're counselling each other. Yeah, our partner's our sounding board. But of course there are things that that we find offensive and are actually harmful. And it's those things that are harmful where we have to make exceptions and say, well, I want for you what you want that makes you happy, but what's actually making you happy is causing great harm and suffering. So we don't want that for them. But within reason, if somebody, for example, decides that they want a sexual relationship with somebody else outside of your relationship, then that can hurt. But in the end, we say, what you want for you is what I want for you. Because if you think you need to look outside of our relationship for physical intimacy, then me, you know, well, that's it, I'm leaving, you know, you can't have that then. And that is us and our ego stepping in. Whereas if we look at it in terms of being with that person, we might say, well, I want you to see the beauty in our intimate relationship and the value of it. And if you need to go outside, you think, and explore something else, then that could be a nourishing exercise. Because I'd rather know that that's what you're doing, yeah, rather than be in the dark and feel betrayed that that's what you're doing.
In all honesty, there's not many relationships that are like that in reality.
No.
Usually they're
No.
lied about.
It's insecurities. So
Allowing that person to grow, isn't it?
yeah,
That's what it is.
it is, yeah, allowing them to grow and to develop. I can't remember whose story it is, but it's a story of a guy who meets a woman at work, and she's become his, like, for better of expression, a soulmate. And he's told his wife that he's got this friend at work, and there's nothing sexual in it, but he likes spending time with her, and he's able to share his emotions with her. And he just feels very comfortable in her company. And of course, the wife can take the view, well, I'm not putting up with that, even though it's non-sexual. This, you know, and you either stop seeing her or that's it. And that can lead to something destructive. Or she might take the view, I think it's really beautiful that you found somebody you can talk to, but it actually hurts me because I'd like to be that person that you could talk to and have that conversation with. And can we work together, or with counselling, so that we can feel that comfortable with each other, that we can have those conversations together. But coming back to, I want to make you happy, yeah, that's in terms of, I want you to make you happy, which is implies by doing what you want for you, because that is going to be a ground where you're going to learn something that will actually ultimately be to the good of you. But yeah, it's we have to qualify that with something that's not going to hurt us or others. Yeah. So in counselling, every counselling session, like the workshops that we do, are confidential, but I have an obligation to disclose anything that's disclosed to me that could be harmful to the person or others to a supervisor. So, yeah. Okay, we're running out of time here. There's lots we can go on, but clarity in us and clarity with our partner is just paramount. And there will be differences and problems will come up. If there's, if somebody starts smoking, they gave up smoking 5 years ago, we got into a relationship with them 2 years ago, and now they've started smoking again. And that wasn't part of the deal up front. So we say, I've noticed you started smoking again, and I don't like it, but if you have one or two out in the garden, that's absolutely fine. And then, a month later, they're smoking in the kitchen out the window, and you really don't like it. And so you say, well, look, I really don't like this, and I'm not getting on with it. So I love you, but now I'm going to have to love you from over there, across the road, because I can't be with you like this. And the same goes for somebody who might be a struggling, recovering alcoholic. Okay, you gave up for a year, and then you've started having wine in the evenings, and now I've noticed that you have to have a nifter at lunchtime, and in the afternoons you're becoming aggressive. And can we work on that? And if there's not a willingness to work on it, then we still love them, but we have to say we have to love them from somewhere else. Yeah. But don't sit on stuff and let it fester. So we all know how something will happen in a relationship and we won't say anything. So, the woman who sees that her husband's been spending 2 hours every night on the internet, and she's seen the history trail, and she says, what do I do? Oh, I'll tell my friend. And then sits on it uncomfortably until something else happens, like they didn't do the washing up, or they were late picking up the kids, and then it all goes off and comes out. And all the stuff, it goes bang and becomes a lot more unmanageable. So, you need to get it out there. So, I'm going to finish here by just saying that two enormous things in our relationships are, one, being comfortable in our authentic selves. Make sure we're happy with us, as we are, regardless of what we aspire to be, but just take off all the robes, the makeup, and have a look at us and say it's beautiful. And then once we know we are comfortable with us being authentic, then we can present ourselves to somebody else and say, hey, this is me. And they say, yeah, that's you. And wow, that's beautiful. And then the other is to be clear, be absolutely clear. And if anything comes up that worries you, concerns you, bring it out. And by you bringing it out, in an existing relationship, it'll make your partner so comfortable and empowered to think, well, if he can do that, I'm going to be brave enough to do that too. And I want to say something that I've been scared of saying, but now I feel comfortable putting it out there. And it's amazing how that increases the bond.